We should probably stop while we're ahead and just go home now. Because the fellow we want to talk about, a little shadier than any of that. There was a man who lived up to his name, or we should say lived down to his name. It was this man. Now in Hebrew, his name is Yaakov. Yaakov. We call him Jacob in English. This son of Isaac, this grandson of Abraham, was without a doubt not just a heel catcher, but he was a genuine heel as well. Some would even say he was a supplanter, a deceiver. A person who made it his practice to lie to almost everybody around him. Jacob always managed to somehow get ahead of people in some dishonest way. When it came down to it, Yaakov, our friend Jacob, he's simply a jerk, wasn't he? Now, I know we don't generally like to think of our Old Testament heroes in that way. We put them up on stained glasses, and we name churches after them. Jacob's one of the big three, right? God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. But the truth is, by hook or by crook, whatever means necessary, Jacob was a master manipulator of other people, hell-bent to get what he wanted in life. Even when he was born, you remember Genesis tells us that he came out of his mother Rebekah's womb quite literally hanging on to his twin brother's heel, his Achev, which is where Yaakov comes from. And from that moment on, Yaakov was determined to never take a back seat to anybody, especially to his brother Esau, or Oshu, as he's called in Hebrew. Now, there is a certain amount of sibling rivalry to be expected, right? How many of you have brothers or sisters? Would you raise your hand? All right. How many of you ever fought with your brother or your sister? Would you raise your hand? Yeah, pretty much the same people, okay? I have an older brother, my parents' only child. And he and I fought. Now, he was several years older, so he usually won. But we scrapped a little bit. Brothers do that. Likewise, we shouldn't expect young children to act responsibly or with consideration for other people. They're kids, so they drop things and they spill things and they kick you by mistake or not. But when they grow up, they're supposed to grow out of that kind of behavior, aren't they? Only Yaakov, he never did. He just got better at it. I used to think some people, old people, were grouchy because they were old, and then I figured out, no, they were grouchy young people. They've just perfected it over the years, getting better and better at it. That's what Yaakov did. Twice we read he managed to cheat Esau, Oshu, his brother, out of what was rightfully his first, when he got him to sell off his inalienable birthright as the oldest son for a little pot of red beans and rice. You have to say Esau wasn't exactly the most discerning fellow. And then secondly, with the shameless help of his mother Rebekah, Yaakov tricked not only Esau, but he downright lied to his father Isaac too, in order to steal the patriarchal blessing that belonged to the firstborn son as well. We ought to notice Yaakov, when he went so far as to try and bring God into his web of lies, when his near blind father Isaac asked Yaakov, thinking him to be Esau, well, how did you find this game and fix it so fast, son? Yaakov replied, the Lord your God gave me success, my father. I bet he didn't even blink an eye when he told that barefaced lie. Esau got a little angry, threatened to kill him. See, Esau was not real bright. He was a little dim. He was kind of dumb. He was pretty thoughtless about things, but he was big and he was strong. Yaakov knew he was in for a beating once their father Isaac wasn't around to sort of modulate things. So Yaakov went north. He traveled some 550 miles to Haran. And they were down in Beersheba, which is in the very south of the Promised Land. And they went all the way up north to Haran, which is now in Syria. Remember, that's where Abram had come from. He went there to live with his mother Rebekah's brother, Laban. But did he change his ways? No. He remained a conniving manipulator even after he fell in love with his cousin Rachel. But isn't it great how sometimes jerks can meet their match? You know, when you're on the freeway and someone overtakes you and they cut you off in the lane in front of you and they speed on and they nearly cause 5 different wrecks, and then you go a little further and you see the police have pulled them over. Don't you just kind of smile when that happens? And thank God for the divine justice in the universe? Turned out Yaakov's uncle Laban was every bit as manipulative and deceiving as his nephew. Makes you wonder if Rebekah's family was kind of like the Lannisters or the Kardashians of the ancient world. After agreeing to work for 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage, at the end of the wedding ceremony, Laban pulled a bait and switch on his young nephew, substituting on the marriage night his older daughter, Leah. And don't you hate it when that happens? Laban made him work 7 more years in order to take Rachel as his wife. And then Laban's boys began to notice our cousin seems to be getting all of the herds for himself, seems to be stealing everything that belongs to us. So once again, Yaakov had to run. He managed to run with both daughters, most of the servants, the better part of the herds and flocks, all the camels, everything he ever wanted in life, he got. But you see, even Yaakov wasn't immune from a simple law of nature that sooner or later everybody has to encounter. We can postpone it, we can put it off. In the end, we can't prevent it. What you sow in life, that you will reap. So if you sow lies and deceit and trickery and deception, it will catch up to you one day. You say, preacher, nobody knows what I've done. I've covered my tracks really well. I cleaned up the paper trail. Erased the history on my computer. My sins have not been seen. I got away with it. And even if they do catch me, I have a high-powered team of lawyers. They can get me off. I'm in the clear. Don't you believe it, friends? Even if no one else does, God sees everything. And sooner or later, if you don't confess it, if you don't bring it to God for him to deal with, he will. Maybe you've heard of a cafeteria line in a school that had a bucket of apples with a sign that said, "Take only one, God is watching." A little further down the line, there was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies to which someone had added a little handmade sign that said, "Take as many as you want, God's watching the apples." But the truth is, God sees the apples and the cookies. He misses nothing. Numbers 32 tells us, you may be sure that your sin will find you out. And for Yaakov, that day finally came when he found himself at the river Jabbok. That's a tributary that comes off the Jordan River, runs east. about midway between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. It's the northern border of the Ammonites. Because with Laban coming behind him, trying to catch up with him and get his stuff back, he found out Esau was rapidly advancing toward him with hundreds of men. The last he'd talked to Esau, Esau said, "I'm going to kill you." Is it any wonder the book of Genesis tells us that a great fear and distress fell upon all who were in the camp, even including that self-sufficient, self-centered supplanter named Jacob himself. For you see, it finally became clear to him that all of his ruling, all of his dealing couldn't get him out of this one. He discovered that, like it or not, every man or woman has to pay the piper one day. For Yaakov, that day was today. So what did he do? Well, what would you do? He sent his wives and children, everybody else, ahead of him across the river Jabbok. And then he settled down to wait. And then, without even planning to do so, I suspect, he began to pray. Because for all of his faults and for all of his low-down ways and all of his deceitfulness, Yaakov knew that he still had a hunger for God. It was a hunger that had been awakened by the crisis in his life, but it was not one that was wholly determined by it. You see, at some point in his life, Yaakov had no doubt heard stories about his father and his grandfather and their encounters with the God who had made a promise to that family. When all else failed, Yaakov began to remember those stories. He prayed, and it was not the kind of monotone prayer that you and I sometimes so very often may mutter, the one just before you doze off asleep in your bed at night. Yaakov really prayed. What I really fancy that he wanted to know from God was simply this: is it too late for me, O Lord? Have I gone too far? Have you given up on me? Could you still forgive a self-centered supplanter and a heel catcher like me? What happened next, I don't pretend to understand. I don't know whether or not it was a man who came and wrestled with Yaakov. The Hebrew says it was an Ish, a mortal, just as Adam had been called in the very beginning. Some will say it's an angel, and if you look at drawings of this and paintings over the centuries, it's often someone that has wings. Martin Luther believed it was the pre-existent Christ. Charles Wesley might have thought that too, because what is it that he's saying, that he said in the song that was sung for us? Are you the one who died for me? Some people say it was God himself who came down in human form. I don't know. I do know it wasn't just a dream, like the earlier vision of the latter had been. It wasn't the hallucination of a desperate man, because when Yaakov got up the next morning, the scriptures tell us he found himself sore all over with a limp in his hip that was to last the rest of his life. You see, when you wrestle with God, he always leaves a mark. Centuries later, Saul found that out when God not only turned him around while on his way to persecute followers of Christ, but he blinded him as well for 3 days. He healed him, but from that point on, Saul or Paul had a thorn in his side, a vision problem. Yaakov had a vision problem too, didn't he? Until he came to understand that the real hunger in his life was not just for things or for status or for power. It was for a relationship with the living God. Only to find that out, Yaakov had to wrestle with God so that God could wrest from Yaakov all of the self-sufficiency and pride that had kept him apart from God all his life. I wonder if you've ever been there. You ever come to the point of realizing that having it all isn't worth it? That it's not possessions or power or pride that will ever produce peace in our hearts? It's only when we find the one who made us, discover why we are really here on this earth. You ever gone one-on-one with the Almighty until the things that hold you are gone? And all you have left to hold on to is God himself. That's what happened to Jacob. At some point during that long night of the soul, I have a feeling that old Yaakov finally stopped wrestling against God and he started clinging to him in a desperate embrace that vividly expressed all of his mixed up emotions about the Almighty, all of his love, all of his hatred, all of his defiance, all of his dependence, all of his pride, all of his powerlessness. And when that happened in the most ironic of ways, that's when Yaakov won. It was never about Esau or Laban or anybody else. It was always about God. What's your name? The visitor from beyond asked the exhausted and spent Jacob at the break of day. He knew his name. That is to say, who have you been? Who do you want to be? My name is Yaakov, came back the answer. Yaakov the heel, Yaakov the supplanter, Yaakov the deceiver, Yaakov the liar, Yaakov the cheat. And oh Lord, I desperately need to have a new life. Your name will no longer be Yaakov, the stranger told him. Now you shall be called Israel, because you've struggled with God and you've overcome. Not by cheating, not by manipulating, simply by hanging on a new name for a new life. May I tell you this morning that the wrestler of heaven will still make that deal with anyone who is willing to honestly go one-on-one with him. Jacob named the place Peniel. It means face, Pini, of God, because he believed he'd come face to face with God. You and I, we can come face to face with God too. It doesn't matter who you've been. It doesn't matter what you've done. If you're willing to own up to it, God is willing to change you and to give you a whole new life. You don't have to be a jerk or a bossy or a liar or afraid or a manipulator. You can be beautiful and beloved and blessed, dignified, purified, forgiven. Now let me be clear, you may still have some scars from the old life. Yaakov walked with a limp the rest of his life. But if you want it this morning, the truth is, you can have a fresh start in Jesus Christ today too. You can come to the altar during the closing song or during our response song in a minute. Find a place to kneel. Let the Lord do a work in you as well. If God could turn Yaakov the heel, Jacob the jerk, into Israel, the man of God, Can he not do the same for you and me today? Now, I suspect this is not the first time you've had an opportunity. You know, it wasn't Jacob's either. Go back to the very beginning of this chapter 32, you will find that before Jacob even got to Peniel and the Jabbok River, he had another encounter with the angels of God. They met him on his way along those dusty roads, and when Jacob saw them, he said simply, "This is the camp of God," Mahanaim in Hebrew. When I read that this week, I found myself thinking, well, that's a really curious name. Mahanaim means two camps. Two camps. You see, Jacob figured it out. Even when we're facing defeat, we're not really all by ourselves, ever. God is camped out right beside us, just waiting for us to come around. Charles Gordon was a famous British general in the 1800s. He is the one that the little rocky escarpment in Jerusalem called Gordon's tomb is named after. He's the one who thought he founded the burial of Christ when he was in Jerusalem. He ended his career for the British military in the Sudan at a very famous place called Khartoum, where there was a battle over not just territory, but over beliefs. The last letter which Charles Gordon wrote from Khartoum in 1883, when that Sudanese city was under siege, had a P.S. on it. And what Gordon said was simply, "The hosts are with me, Mahanaim." No matter who you are or who you've been, may I tell you that the hosts are with you too this morning, dear friends? They're on that road of life right in front of you. They're standing all around you on holy ground. What was it Charles Wesley said in that beautiful hymn? His nature and his name really are love. Amen.